evening, everyone. You learn something new every day, and I didn't know there was a National Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, so that's great. My name is Will Espero. I'm the Vice President of the Vice Senate and currently the Vice Chair of the Committee on Public Safety, Intergovernmental and Military Affairs. Last session, I was the chairman of that same committee, and thus I had the opportunity to work with the representative here and others. Let me quickly just introduce, we have a couple legislators in the audience as well, Senator Lorraine Inouye and Representative Linda Coit there. Aloha. From the neighbor islands. But we're going through a transition as a nation. There's all things changing. We're talking about a détente or peace with Cuba and Iran, same-sex marriage, and now the issue of hemp and marijuana is coming full circle. As many of you may know, our nation was somewhat founded on hemp. There was a law early in the 13 colonies, they had to mandatorily sell hemp that was used as an export crop back to England. And so that funded many things way back then, I'm sure, and up until the 1900s, marijuana itself was legal in our nation. Then between 1910 and 1920, there was a big effort to make it illegal, and there were rumors spread and all sorts of things saying how marijuana is the evilness brought by Mexicans, and it's used by minorities and blacks and Filipinos, and they're going to create evil and havoc in white society. And then you had companies tied to big corporations like DuPont. You had the Hearst Corporation and his involvement with forest and paper, and thus marijuana was outlawed. Now we're maybe coming full circle with states legalizing, although today is nothing to do with legalization, but actually closing the gaps with our medical marijuana legislation, which was passed in the year 2000, which, by the way, was my first year in the legislature. So, it's taken 16 years to get where we are. And I just want to thank everybody that was a part of that. We had a task force in 2014 with many individuals in government, as well as members of the public. And from the task force, we were able to introduce legislation. And Representative Belatti on my left here, she was a key player in helping us get things passed. Let me just say that this is going to provide opportunities for many individuals. And this is really just the ground floor, the beginning. We're only going to have 8 licenses this first go-round, only 8. But where you folks need to be involved in and be advocates is what's going to happen in 2017, because that's really just around the corner. And in 2017, the Department of Health will have the opportunity to open up the medical marijuana dispensary program. And currently, the state law mentions that using, if they want to, the ratio of 1 to 500. Okay? And if you use that ratio of 1 to 500, and hypothetically say our current registered patient base will go from 13,000 today to possibly, let's say, 20,000. Okay? You're looking at potentially 40 dispensaries. And we in the legislature are going to have to decide what phase 2 is going to be. This is just the startup phase. This is the quote-unquote pilot that we've been looking at states across the nation, looking at their best practices, looking at what works, what doesn't work. But this is just getting us off the ground running. And there's still a lot for us to learn. We have experts around the nation that are going to help, but still it's going to be a learning phase, as you're going to hear from the panel. But right now it's a vertical, top down, and in 2017, we're going to have to decide. We're going to have 2 legislative sessions, 2016 and 2017, to amend and change the bill, make it better, tweak it, whatever the case may be. And that's where your advocacy is going to be very, very important, talking to your legislators, you know, getting the patients, the caregivers. With the number of people interested now, you know, that's easily 20, 30,000 people that could be a strong base of lobbying and advocacy. And we're going to have to decide, once we do expand beyond this original 8, okay, how are we going to do it? Okay, do you like the merit base? At one time, one legislator was saying first come, first serve, but we sunk that one real quickly. Should it be a lottery? Who knows what it's going to be, but these next 2 sessions are going to shape the medical marijuana program, and probably in those 2 years we'll even try a strong attempt for decriminalization. FYI, the Senate has tried that in the past. We have passed it in the Senate. It has stalled in the House. But I don't think legalization is going to happen anytime soon. I think maybe decriminalization has a good chance, but how we handle the medical marijuana program is going to be very important in dictating where we go, how we go, and to what degree. So I want to thank all of you. I want to thank Lynn for putting this together, and all those involved. This is going to be a great conversation this weekend, as well as within the next 6 to 7 months, because come January, boy, things are going to go fast, real fast. And even that July, there's a good article, by the way, in Pacific Business News. If you haven't seen it, check it out. But that July 2016 deadline is really a fast turnaround. I personally don't think we're going to be 100% up by then, but we'll see. And like I said, I'm sure we'll be able to discuss that more in the next hour or so. Thank you very much.
So since the passage of this bill, I have been inundated, as I'm sure Senator Espero has been, with lots of folks calling locally, folks from the mainland coming in. I know that there's a lot of business activity going on. So I kind of want to get a sense of who it is that we're talking to today, because again, we've seen lots of folks coming through the legislative halls. How many of you are from the island of Oahu? Maui? Anyone from Maui? Kauai? And Big Island.
Who else raised their hand?
Awesome. Do we,
No one else?
oh, Molokai. Yay.
Aloha.
How many of you are either designated caregivers or know someone who is a designated caregiver? So we've got growing expertise in here. How many of you are registered patients or know a registered patient? Okay. And how many of you, and no judgment here, how many of you philosophically believe that cannabis should be decriminalized or legalized? Got it. Okay. So I know who my audience is, and I'm going to do a little bit of kind of good cop, bad cop with you right now, since there's been a lot of, again, because we've seen so much, and I'd like to be able to impart upon you and share with you all of the kinds of things that I'm sharing with people who are coming in and just knocking on my door. And I have cards, so if any of you want cards, I'm happy to pass these around. And I make myself, and I know Senator Espero also makes himself available to talk with anyone. There's really 3 takeaway points that I'd like to have you guys leave with, based upon just kind of the business activity I've seen just in the last 3 months. First one, patience is a virtue. We need to understand, you folks need to understand as a growing industry, that the work being done by the Department of Health is going to be very constricted, and they are running as fast as they can. I know that Senator Espero is in conversation with the Department of Health. I check in with them once a week. Even before the bill was signed into law, they were doing their due diligence in anticipation that the law was going to be passed. And I will share with you that during the passage of the bill, the writing of the legislation, they were right there with us. So you have a friend with the Department of Health, but you also need to be able to give them the room to do the work that they need to do. There are going to be 4 parallel tracks that they're really working on in the next 6 months. The first and one of the most difficult things will be hiring staff. They have already decided where to put the program. It's going to be under the Office of Healthcare Assurance, under Chief Keith Ridley. Peter Whitaker will continue to run the program for the patient registry, but within the department, they're going to have to hire up to, and they're allowed to hire up to 5 employees. So that is going to be, and that's critical, because those are going to be the people who are going to be overseeing the writing of the rules. They're going to be the ones doing the inspections. So that's and that's going to be an internal process. The next thing they're going to be doing, another parallel track that they're going to be working on, is to write the actual rules. I know you guys have lots of questions about that, but just to give you the impact of the work that they're doing, they're going to have to spell out the application, criteria, and selection process for the dispensaries. They're going to be looking at security requirements. They're going to have to figure out what the auditing, inspecting, and administrative penalties will be if a dispensary operates outside of those regulations. They're going to have to identify lab standards and requirements that will be imposed upon the dispensaries for the tracking of marijuana or cannabis from seed to clone to dry product to manufactured product. So those four, just that alone could probably take them 2 years, and we've asked them to do that in 6 months or less. The third parallel track that they're going to be doing in relation to those rules is they're going to have to identify and procure a seed to sale tracking vendor for their own regulatory and enforcement needs. So, there's only a few vendors out there. We gave them the opportunity to do it in a more quick manner by not subjecting them to procurement rules, but they still have to go out and inquire with those companies and then pick the best one for the state. For you folks, that's going to be something of interest, because when they choose that C2 sale tracking, if you are interested in applying for a dispensary, you're going to have to be able to access that. So you're going to have to consider what your options are when that is determined. Finally, in addition, the fourth parallel track that I think is something that's very important to them is they're going to have to identify and certify independent labs. These are going to be labs that do not currently exist. So you're also talking about labs that are going to have to come in, and maybe there might be local expertise to create these labs, but I don't know that there is. And they're going to have to go through their own process of getting a DEA license or whatever it is they need to do to be able to test and then certify cannabis as a Schedule I substance. So as you can tell, again, patience is a virtue. These are the things that are happening now and behind the scenes. My second takeaway for you, and this is something that, again, based upon kind of the activity I've seen, please remember, if patience is a virtue, greed is a vice. What concerns me is that folks are not reading the bill and understanding that what the legislature intended was to create a process. Yes, there's only going to be 8 dispensaries in this first phase. But as Senator Espero said, there is a phased-in approach, and we did empower and authorize the Department of Health in October 2017 to be able to identify and add additional dispensary licenses. Now, knowing that, I'd also point to you folks in the bill that I've had individuals come up to me and say, well, can we organize ourselves this way? Can this one person get a license on Maui? Can this one person get a license on Maui? Can we cross? And I would just like to point you to the provision in the bill that says no person may be granted a dispensary license in more than one county. So we really should take that to heart. Now, that's not saying that there can't be some creativity, because the bill also does encourage more flexible business arrangements. And we do, in fact, define medical marijuana dispensaries as a person, and that's a legal term. A person is a business, licensed to own, operate, or subcontract up to 2 production centers and up to 2 retail dispensing locations. So there is opportunities, and as you look around and as you come to these kinds of events where there's an opportunity to meet other folks who are in the industry, I think you have to be open to having those flexible, to exploring those flexible business arrangements. I would really like to thank Senator Espero, because it was in those last day, it was in our last conversation with the Attorney General's office that Willie said, can we add subcontracting? And I had been struggling with the definition, and there was a strong push to create this vertically integrated system. And I had been pushing against that because the task force had in fact wanted us to do more horizontal. But that was the compromise. That subcontracting does in fact, that language does in fact allow for more flexible business arrangements. So I encourage folks to not be, I'm not naive to think that this isn't about making and having a viable business, but really, we, as an industry, you folks need to really understand that there needs to be cooperation. And that's the third and final point that I would leave you with. Due diligence and cooperation are going to be the keys to success for this industry. You need to, as part of due diligence, is you need to just read House Bill 321. If you want to come meet with me and ask me specific questions about the bill, read the bill before just coming to me and asking me questions, because you know, you really need, there's so much, this bill is outlines what you need to do to get your businesses ready. For those of you who are local here, I have heard, you know, some criticism, you know, this bill is a corporatist bill. It's really going to take a lot of money. It's not going to help the little guy, and your criticism may be valid. But if we want a professional industry, if we want to be in compliance with the Cole Memorandum, which I hope Mr. Briner will talk about later, this is the pathway to getting a strong system. And what I would encourage for the locals here to do, we put enough in this bill where the individual applicant has to have 5 years of residency. The entity that is going to be applying with that individual entity has to have 51% ownership locally. They have to have a track record of business here in Hawaii. So you need to, as locals, begin to build your team, recognize and embrace that this team may include not just outside money, because you know, outside money coming in is fine, but you also have to look outside for expertise. Because while I noticed that there was a lot of hands for caregivers, growing for one patient, which is all you're supposed to be doing, because you're only a caregiver for one person, and maybe yourself, so up to 14 plants, growing 3,000 plants in one setting is a completely different operation, completely different. So you are going to need the expertise that you have on your own, and you need to go outside and get that expertise. To those who are coming from outside of our community, and I know there are some of you here, and I thank you, I welcome you. I think that it's wonderful that we're going to have this outside expertise. But I just ask you to show respect to the locals, and I think, you know, read the bill as well. You have to engage local attorneys. You're going to have to engage local realtors because they know this place. They know the laws. Some simple questions that are brought to me, you could get answered by a lawyer because that's all, it's already all in the bill, but you may just not understand, you know, something that in the bill or the way we use a certain term of art. So lawyers, and I know Mr. Briner can see this, lawyers and Mr. Pingree, I think Mr. Pingree, if you could wave your hand too. You know, there's a whole cadre of people, Mr. Kinney, he's a lawyer, but also an insurance agent. These are going to be the people who we need to connect with because it's about building an industry. It's not just about the growing aspect. It's about building an industry that's going to support all of your efforts. These kinds of networking opportunities need to continue, so I really want to thank Lynn for doing what she did. A good outcome from this expo, as well as I know that there's even another expo already being planned for January. I would urge this group of people, if you're going to go to the next expo, think about creating a cannabis chamber of commerce for Hawaii. That could be one very solid outcome from this expo. Let's talk and see if we can make a chapter of Hawaii for the Chamber of Commerce. And that will give you that voice, that advocacy that's going to be needed as we move into future legislative sessions. We need to demonstrate our professionalism as an industry. We need to reach out to existing professional associations. On that note, I will say that because these networking opportunities are important, I would invite you to come, and the date has not yet been set, but the Hawaii State Bar Association is going to be putting on a continuing legal education course. It's targeted mostly for lawyers. It's going to be in August. I'm helping to set it up. It's going to be a panel that's going to include representatives from the Department of Health and the Attorney General. You're invited to come, even though you're not an attorney. Non-attorneys are welcome to HSBA events. It's those kinds of things. You need to be on the lookout for when professional associations have these types of meetings. The place that you can go to keep informed about what's happening is health.hawaii.gov/medical marijuana. That is the site. If anything is going to come up in the Department of Health, it's going to be at that website. So you should commit that to memory. health.hawaii.gov/medical marijuana. They will be, part of their task in House Bill 321 is to have public health education. So they are interested in doing that. They have to do all those other 4 things that I mentioned previously, but they are interested in doing that. So whenever the Department of Health puts out information, you should go to that place and just monitor it on a regular basis. So with that, those are my 3 takeaway points that I have to answer any questions.